Across the Atlantic, a top Catholic leader is blasting the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy. It targets people caught crossing the U.S. border illegally. Protesters, activists and some members of Congress are also speaking out and took to the streets of Washington on Wednesday.
Immigrants are welcome here!
Demonstrators making their voices heard hundreds of kilometers from the U.S. border with Mexico. It's there that some 500 children are reported to have been separated from their parents since last month. Our Ed Levendera has more now from the border town of McAllen in Texas.
Little more than a month ago, the Trump administration instituted a zero-tolerance policy. The Department of Justice saying that anyone caught entering the country illegally here through the southern border would face prosecution, a misdemeanor charge of illegal entry. And that has dramatically changed the landscape inside of federal courtrooms here along the U.S. southern border, where hundreds of people have been turning up every day in the morning and the afternoon to face this criminal charge. Very different from what has been done in this country in the United States over the last 20 years. And one of the fallouts of that policy is that hundreds of families are being separated. The Department of Justice says it's not keeping track of how many families are separated, but here in this border town of McAllen, Texas, federal public defender tells us that over the course of the last month, more than 500 families have been separated. They describe this as an inhumane tactic causing a great deal of stress. The Trump administration and Attorney General Jeff Sessions says that in some way they hope that this serves as a deterrent, that as word spreads back into Central America and Mexico, where most of these immigrants are coming from, the word will spread and serve as a deterrent to keep these people from making the journey north. Advocates and immigrant rights activists say they just don't believe that is the case. But some of the stories that we've heard from immigrants, simply gut-wrenching. One activist told us that she was told by an immigrant that her child, her baby, was taken away from her while she was breastfeeding the child inside of a detention center just in the last couple of days. Another man asked for leniency in his sentence for pleading guilty to that illegal entry charge and said, please give me a light sentence because I want to be able to get back to my child as soon as possible. And activists say they have a great deal of concern over just how quickly and how all of these families will be reunified. They're not exactly convinced that it will work out smoothly. So those are some of the dramatic changes we've seen here along the U.S. southern border, and many people anxiously and furiously trying to figure out how all of this will play out in the coming months. Ed Lavendera, CNN, McAllen, Texas.
So let's talk more about this with Theresa Cardinal Brown. She is Director of Immigration Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and she comes to us from Washington. Good to have you with us again.
Glad to be back.
Now, you have worked on immigration policy for many years. What's your overall assessment of the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy, where anyone caught entering the country illegally faces prosecution?
Well, clearly the president is trying to do everything he can within the existing authorities of the law to try to deter immigrants from coming to the border. And this policy of prosecution and the result of that being the separation of children from adults that they may be traveling with is an attempt to sort of convince migrants that coming to the U.S. border is not going to go well for them. It's going to be bad. It remains to be seen whether the impact is going to be what he wants, but that's clearly the attempt that's being tried here. I think there's also a portion of this that is about trying to force Congress to act. If the administration is saying, oh, we have to do this because we don't have another choice unless Congress does something, that may be something that they're trying to do as well. But as a matter of dealing with the migration system at the border, it is creating other ramifications. It's having impacts throughout the rest of the immigration system in detention centers and immigration courts that are now going to fill up.
Now, as you mentioned, hundreds of families are being separated as a result of this policy, children taken from parents, and the Trump administration, as you mentioned, is hoping it will actually work as a deterrence for people, to stop people from coming to the United States and seeking asylum. Is there any proof that's working, or is there any proof that there are fewer numbers that would fuel this effort and make them think, well, we've got to keep doing this, it's working?
Well, At least in the last month, we haven't seen that. So from the April to May numbers, for example, there was still an increase in the number of people that have been apprehended at the border. So in the short time the policy's been in place, no, we have not seen a decrease in the number of people arriving. Now, it may be too soon to tell, but the other thing I would just point out is that many of these people are fleeing crime. They are fleeing situations where they really believe their life or the life of their child is in danger. And to them, yes, it's terrible that they may be detained and even separation from their children, but trying to tell a migrant, stay where you are and you believe you'll be certainly killed, or make a try to come to the U.S. border, that's a hard thing to say. And I also would say that, we have to look at what this says about America. If our values are that we're going to try to make it so nasty for you to come that you won't try, is that who we are as a nation? I think that's the question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you, is the Trump administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy in breach of international refugee protection rules? What are human rights advocates saying about all this?
Well, under international law, of course, we are obligated to give people who ask for asylum a chance for their cases to be heard. And the administration will say, well, they do get a chance for it to be heard after they have served whatever time for prosecution. Human rights people are saying this is a cruel policy, that the impact, the actual point of this of trying to deter asylum seekers actually is not in accordance with international law. And there are lawsuits being filed right now about that, whether or not the act of doing this is a violation of due process since the parents are being separated from the kids. So I think, like many Trump immigration policies, this one is likely to be litigated in the courts, and we'll see where it comes down after that.
Yeah, we certainly shall. We'll keep a very close eye on that. Theresa Cardinal Brown, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.